everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of season 2 of Lit Happens with co-host Adrielle and myself, Belinda. How are you, Adrielle?
I'm good, Bill. Going well. We're sort of
hmm
into the swing of things now in school. So, what better way to sort of speak about the school term, especially as senior English teachers, about ATARs, which we're going to sort of be discussing. So, doing well,
hmm
keeping well, excited. These are the terms we're supposed to use, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, get us all super psyched and ready to go.
Yeah. No, honestly,
Yeah,
though, it's good. It's good. I'm looking forward
mm,
to it. So, it's been a great year so
absolutely.
far and to date. So, it's going to be
hmm
good, and yeah, we'll have some great discussions today.
Yeah, as you just mentioned a little bit, today's episode is a bit of a HSC survival guide, managing ATAR stress without losing your well-being. Obviously, a couple months ago, we would have had our most recent HSC cohorts grab their ATARs, and now teachers will be looking ahead at the new HSC group that's in their second term now. So things are getting, heating up, things are getting really real. And we thought we would just talk to you about like some strategies and suggestions. And as always, our own kind of personal anecdote and experiences. Before we get into that though, we do have a little quip for today. So Adriel, um, sharing your own HSC ATAR story, the good, the bad, or the stressful. HSC ATARs and senior classes, are they lit? Do they make you want to quit?
Sharing my personal stories. You know
hmm
what? I think it's lit. I think it gives students perspective. I know we're all different sort of candidates whenever we are sitting in the year 12 course. I think I've shared this before. I always say this actually in class. I said, don't be like Mr. Manny in class. Sorry, don't be like Mr. Manny when he was in year 12 because his HSC, though we got through it, we were a little bit apathetic. And, some of the terms that I currently coin and use in our discourse and our dialogue here. But I think it's good. It gives students perspective where you
hmm
can sort of show the students that what you get when you do work hard afterwards, obviously, but the ATAR isn't the be all and end all. I know me
Yeah.
personally, I probably didn't get the ATAR that I wanted if you compare it to maybe something that my sister did, who's
Mhm.
a few years my younger. But I know in life now we're doing all right, So we're going well, and I think sharing those HSC sort of stories and some of those challenges you have along the way
Mhm.
definitely gives our students perspective. Uh, it's normal to be stressed. It's normal to have good times with friends and the memories that you make along the way. And obviously, the bad is always going to be associated with assessment times and marks and the stresses that come along with all of these assessments. So I think it's good to share these things with our students. It's lit, as per our question here,
Mhm.
but it's good to be vulnerable. I think
Yeah,
in these circumstances with our students. Yeah,
absolutely. I love that because it shows the human side because, at the end of the day, you don't know what your ATAR is going to be. You're
yeah,
hoping for the best and, you might have a figure in mind because you know sort of what you want to do in university and therefore you've got a number. Some people
yeah,
don't. And yeah, so you're right. It does. Sometimes you have those, hard stories where students are disappointed they didn't quite get what they wanted. And you have the success stories. I think it's trying to balance
yeah.
both those types of students, like being really respectful and being really present for both those situations. Like
Mm,
I know with me, I had a pretty good ATAR.
mm,
And I remember the thing for me was like, I just say to the guys, like, you got to pick stuff you're interested in because
yeah,
I know that there were subjects that I was told I should do,
yeah,
and in the end, like I sort of suffered through them, and I was like, I just don't want to spend my last year doing a particular subject that I just
yeah,
dislike. I just dislike
yeah,
everything about it, even though it might rank well. And I dropped it, and I did something much more fun and creative instead. And I think it's
yeah.
good for students to know you don't always have to do the typical things for
Mm,
the sake of
mm,
doing them. I always think you're much more rewarded when
yeah,
you're doing the subjects that you enjoy that pique your interest because you're actually going to try and give them a go as opposed
mm,
to kind of suffering through because that's what you're supposed to do. Because I know we all get told that, oh, what do you want to do? Oh, well, then you should be doing this, should be doing that. And
yeah,
I know back in the day, like there was really a lot of prerequisites, but now a lot of the unis don't have
yeah.
too many.
It's
And
gone
even
now.
if they're
Yeah,
prerequisite, yeah, they often offer like a quick 6 week bridging, and you
yeah,
can, yeah, I just hate the thought of, someone being in their final year, which is stressful enough as it is, and then you're doing stuff that you don't actually like. Why? Because someone told you should probably do
yeah,
it. I mean,
yeah.
don't take my advice. I'm not like a counselor or anything, but speak to someone, air that out, get
Mm,
that out of your system. And
mm,
because I think if you are going to give it your best crack, you're going to do that really well when you're doing things that you enjoy and
yeah,
are who you are and you feel confident with. So, and I see that a lot. I see students who are like, okay, these might not be the really high scaling subjects, or maybe I'm doing a combination, but this is what I love and I'm doing what I love, and I want to finish the year on that positive and that goodness instead of that
yeah,
struggle. And I think that's okay too. And like, Adriel, we've taught kids too where the ATAR is not a goal of
yeah,
theirs.
yeah,
um
yeah.
and I
Exactly.
think it's really mature, I think, for them to go, you know what, I'm going to be a realist here.
Yeah,
I don't want to go for that. It's not what I'm intending to do. Like, this is what I think is my path, and kind of
mm,
owning that. I know that's probably a bit contentious depending what school students are in and where they are, but sometimes we do have to like listen to the kids and not just kind of force them into maybe a mold that we think, or you,
mm,
but you would do really well in this. They're like, yeah, but I hate that because I used to
mm.
get the, yeah, but I don't want a bar of that, and yeah.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah,
I think they're really good. I think they're good for goals. I think they're good for something tangible. But yeah, there's definitely, exactly like you said, a lot of success in life well after the ATAR. And like, you'll agree with me, like, when do we ever talk about what our ATAR is? I don't think I've ever told a person, like, not since I first got my ATAR. I don't think I've ever
no,
since then spoken about my ATARs, blah blah blah. Like, it's just not.
yeah,
I think it's a good way to maybe get you on a specific path or
yeah,
track, but it's not
yeah,
it's not the be all end all of success, is it?
yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think it's funny you mentioned a few things there, and we'll probably discuss this as the episode goes along.
Mm,
I like that idea, like where I mean, I shared this. I actually shared this with most of my senior students. I said I'm an English teacher, and I have been so for the last decade or so. But in high school, I did 2 unit mathematics, which is like advanced mathematics. I did it. I wasn't good at it. Physics, chemistry. These are like subjects that you look at now and you're just like, oh, where is that application now in my current life? So I guess today's episode is going to delve into a little bit of what is
mm,
relevant. How do we make the most of even subjects that we probably have been coerced or forced into doing. Obviously,
mhm.
times are changing, and yeah, we'll discuss these things. But I think those personal
Yeah,
stories definitely resonate with our students quite well. So
yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Well, let's get into it then. So, I want to ask, what does the ATAR actually represent, and how can we help our students understand its true role as a future pathway? I love that phrasing. That's a really great way of
yeah,
putting it. Future pathway. What are your thoughts,
yeah,
Adriel?
awesome. So I think when we're looking at ATAR, it's not a mark first and foremost. It's a rank where you
It's a
fit
rank.
between. I think it's like the bottom end there, whatever the bottom mark is, and then 99.9. There's no 100, which is
Mhm.
often a misconception. I'm not one of the
Mhm.
boffins that knows all about it, but I know roughly, it's a
Mhm.
rank. It's where you
Yeah.
fit within the whole cohort for the grade, which is
Yeah.
that respective year in the course that you are sitting. So I think that's important to note. It's where you fit within the scale. And I
Mhm.
think it's important for students to understand that because at the end of the day, where you fit within the scale is a very holistic approach to learning. You're
Yes.
doing 5 6 subjects. It's your top 10 units in the HSC that are counted. It's a mixture or combination between your school assessment, your exam mark, your moderated assessment after you sit. Both of those respective forms of assessment. So there's a lot of things that are out of your hands or out of
Yeah.
your control And I think one of the important things in actually allowing our students to understand what an ATAR actually represents is we control the factors that we can control. So things that we can practically put into place are work hard, have a
Yeah.
routine, study hard, you know, give it your best shot. Um, it sounds simple, and it is often one of the hardest things for us to grasp as teachers, along with students, because we're just like, I know, like, I get frustrated a little bit sometimes when, you've got those cuspy sort of students when you get your rap data back and it's like
Yeah.
they got 59 instead of a 90, and you're like, come
Yeah.
on, man, what's
Yeah, or
going on? I want
70. And you're
five.
like, "You're
Yeah,
so close." Yeah.
it's like, and then you get like, a clump of students in that range, and you're just like, well, at the end of the day, that mark isn't going to define them, and the ATAR isn't going to change too much either, in regards to that. Look, it may change a few points. I'll say this to students as well, actually. Now, this is counter to what I have just been mentioning. This is where if you work hard, you will get what you deserve. So every mark does matter, when it does come to the ATAR, because it's all about like the clumping. It's like
Yes, of course.
how many marks you got in a certain range. So, for example, I'll say this to students. So, if someone scored a 75 and you had I don't know, 1,000 students in that cohort score 75 in their moderated assessment mask, but only 600 or only 500 students scored a 77, let's say. It's only 2 mark difference. The ATARs may be about 5 ranking points different, because of the amount of students that got that 77 as opposed to that
Mhm.
75. So we do say these to we do give these pieces of advice to our students in order to get the best they can. But at the end of the day, the ATAR doesn't define you as a human being. Because like you mentioned before, you'll get into whichever uni course no matter what. There's always where there's a will, there's a way. Um,
Yeah.
and I think you clearly mentioned this earlier. The ATAR, it just represents a ranking at a particular point in time.
Mm.
Have we talked about this afterwards? Bar maybe speaking about it in an episode today. I mean, I don't go around showboating. Not that I wanted to showboat my ATAR, whatever, back in the day, but you don't use it in everyday talk or
It's
speech.
just not a
Like,
thing. It's just not a
no, that's
thing.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And again, in universities, you're going to have a whole variety of people. People that are early, straight up, first year uh, students there, and then you've got like postgraduate students sometimes sitting like another course, or people that have been
Mhm.
there as perpetual or perennial sort of university students there. So again, it doesn't matter like in the whole scheme of things. Um, it doesn't define your worth, the ATAR, but it's a nice thing to work hard towards. It is a nice achievement, a personal sense of achievement,
Yeah.
and this is where we find that balance, I think. So,
Yeah.
in terms of your future pathways, the ATAR does allow you opportunity. I always say this: a good ATAR, allows you more opportunities.
True.
However, it's up to you as an individual to actually step into those opportunities. You can be given, like, I could give someone plenty of opportunities to do things, but it doesn't matter unless they step into it and actually action those
Mm.
opportunities, or
Mhm.
select what they want to be doing. I think this is a nice way of looking at your ATAR. Like,
Mhm.
you may limit your choices. However, again, those limited choices may still float your boat afterwards if your ATAR isn't as high. And like we just said, there are other options as well. There's many pathways in this day and age, so you're never really restricted. But I always had this sort of old adage. It's like, what you can achieve now, you may as well put the hard work in, so you don't have to make sacrifices later on down the track, which may take you a little bit longer. So
That's true.
these are different ways in which we might look at this ranking, which is the ATAR.
Yeah. No, I like what you said, and I like that. That's a lot of good food for thought for the students. It'll give you more access to maybe more opportunities, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way that you can get an
Yeah,
opportunity. The path might take you a little bit, different if you didn't get that ATAR, but we all get I don't really know anyone who didn't get where they wanted to go, just because they
yeah,
didn't get the exact ATAR. So maybe it might be the most straightforward way or one easier way. And like you said, Adriel, therefore, if you work really hard, you're rewarded by that easier pathway, or quicker, maybe not easier, maybe quicker
yeah,
pathway. But there's
yeah,
definitely many ways. I think it's good that you noted as well, because I often have a lot of students that have that misconception of, well, if I get 70s in my subject, then my ATAR is going to be in the 70s. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not like an
It's
average
not
like
like
that.
that.
Doesn't, yeah. So I'll say to my guys, like, if let's say someone got an ATAR of 80, that means they're
Yeah.
sitting in that top 20% if the cohort. If your
Mm.
results were very average compared to all the other students, that did the HSC, then your ATAR is probably going to be average in the 50s, like trying to explain to them. And I think they often, I know my students in the past often, and with kids, like their world is quite small, and they often have
Yeah.
this thought of like big fish, small pond. And I
Yeah.
have to remind them there are 70,000, give or take, students
Yeah.
every year that sit the HSC alongside
Mm.
them. And that sometimes is a
Mm.
bit eye opening. And,
Yep.
it helps explain a little bit why different subjects are scaled. Well, they're all scaled, and then your results are all compared so that we can do a
Yeah.
bit of a ranking so that you can get a tangible mark that does sort of determine how you went results wise. Now, that's always the academic progress, right? It's not necessarily going to factor in the social strides that you may
Yeah.
be made, the
Yeah.
emotional growth that you may be made. So I think it's really nice for students to remember that those things are things that you will be rewarded with when you finish year
Mm.
12,
Mm.
aside from just that academic kind of ATAR and what the piece of paper says. So
Yeah.
I think we should move on to question 2 now then, Adriel. So how does the pressure around the ATAR impact student well-being, and what signs
Mm.
should teachers or English teachers or all teachers be watching for in their year 11 and 12 classes this year?
Yeah.
Good
I
question.
think there's another thing, and this is where you want to build like your holistic sort of learning for students. And if you framed this whole idea in your learning sequence about the ideas that they will be stressed, you will feel face pressures. You'll find these normally around those assessment periods where students have 6 or 5 assessments, or more if they're doing extension subjects, and they'll sit maybe quietly in a class, or maybe they're inattentive. And these are little cues that you'll probably pick up with. You'll see, maybe a normally bright and bubbly student just quiet. They might not be crying, or they might not be showing emotion. And then you might just, ask them a question here or there. And these are just some little signs that you probably as a teacher want to pick up on. And as students, just understand that there are these pressures, and we get these pressures in life as well. I mean, I have some of those moments, just sitting thinking about bills and work that we need to be doing. So it's building us for the future. But I think the ATAR pressures can also come from the family backgrounds, your pressure that students put on themselves to achieve high standards. So there are a whole heap of different things. So it's about understanding your students. I think we need to understand each and every individual in your class. So really get to know your students, understand a little bit about their backgrounds, their families, and these are things that you'll ask maybe at the beginning of year 11, in the getting to know sort of stages, so that you can best support them and shape them in the way that will allow them not to be as stressed when it comes to ATAR. I know, for example,
Mm.
like I had a recent discussion with one of my students who has just started the prelim course, and first lesson in, they were already stressed about all the things that might be
Oh,
had, or
no.
all these possibilities, and you're
Yeah.
just like, okay.
Mhm.
But again, it's just that's just the type of student that you do come across, and this is where you play chess with your own teaching pedagogy there, where it's like, okay, what's the next step? How are we going to best get this student on board to achieve the best that they can? And this will be through your dialogue, your discourse, your support, the scaffolds that you might pop in place for them, the adjustments that you'll make. And these are why, I guess, NESA does account for these when we are developing the programs, the differentiated learning and whatnot that we need to be adhering to in
Mhm.
our classes. But yeah, look, I would say like some of the more literal practical things. You're looking at changes in student dynamic, personality, tone. Their bubbly personality might now be flat. Um, Maybe they're not completing work as often as they used to now, and you might check in with them in that sense. So there's a few different things, but ATAR pressure is definitely the truth. Some students will say they don't care, but then they come to assessment period, and it's like they do care when they look at their marks, and they haven't achieved
Mm.
the best they could. So again, you're looking at well-being there. You'll ask them holistically. Well, what are you doing? Are you going home and scrolling on a screen for like 3, 4 hours of a day, or are you practically, do you go for a walk? Do you go to the gym? Are you managing your time between work? Because some of them, let's be honest, will be working part time. Are you
Yeah.
working too much? Like, these are questions that you will go in, and at the end of the day, you have to sort of tell the students, well, these are the plans that we can put in place, but you need to action them as well. So, if you're putting the pressure to achieve a high ATAR, get that high ranking, well, you're going to have to put the work in. It just doesn't happen. So, being real about these things as well are very important. But yeah, well, I think those are the important things that
Mhm.
we do need to consider when we are looking at the pressures of the ATAR. A lot of family pressures, I know, in particular.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
good point, good point.
we'll do so. But yeah, family and personal pressures are probably those big ones that we'll see with our students.
Well, continuing on then with the student mindset then, Adriel, I'll ask you the next question because it kind of leads on from what you've just
Yep.
been talking about there. So, thinking about student mindset, so why do you think so many of our students maybe tie their sense of self-worth to this ATAR, to this mark? Because we,
Mm,
we do know it can have quite a big impact on like their self-esteem and all of that. So how might you gently challenge that narrative within a classroom? What are
yeah.
some of your hot
Yeah.
tips there?
I think you need to frame this right from the beginning of year 11. As a teacher, I'll often say this. I say, great marks, we are going to get them. We're definitely going to get them, but they come from working hard. So
Mm,
you have to challenge the narrative of just the mark being the only thing that you need to work towards. But the
mm,
mark will be a result of your hard work. So we start to implement hard work right from the beginning, routine right from the beginning. This especially weeds out a lot of the misconceptions around students that just think they're naturally gifted or talented. So, they'll just go in and do whatever they will do on the spot. And, sometimes they may be lucky, but more often than
mm.
not, that luck does run out after a little while. So I
Yeah.
think the reason why many students do tie their sense of self-worth to their HR is because they think this is one of those moments in life where, or the pinnacle moments in life where it's the be all and end all. If
Mhm.
don't do well here, um, well, that's my life gone, or my opportunity's gone. But as we've been discussing, in Australia, we're very, very fortunate with the pathways that we have available to us
Yes.
in the education sort of networks here. So rather than looking at it as the be all and end all, it's actually the beginning of something new. It's just, the pathways will be different for people. So, a nice way to look at it is, you might set like a goal up on the board. This might be your goal, and you might have like 17 different lines running to that goal, and different lengths and different distances in terms of those lines for the students to sort of look at and be like, well, some of you will be on different paths, and no matter what the path you take out of, I just use 17 as an example there, whichever of those pathways you take, everyone's still going to reach their goals eventually, you know, whether it be quickly, whether it be later, depends on how much hard work you put in. Like, it's good visual cues for students to look at and
Mhm.
understand. But I think, the sense of self like worth, it's definitely, you want to challenge that narrative a lot because you are far greater than your ATAR because you are far more capable. I'm an example of this. After high school, again, ATAR wasn't like super poor, but it wasn't the best that I could have achieved. Like, if I was to go back and sit my HSC now, I'd be disappointed if I didn't rank in the top 10%. Like,
Yeah,
but
100%. I think about that too. Like
yeah, that's right.
my like as a teenager, like I tried, but
Yeah,
I probably could have tried more, you know?
of course,
We all
of
reflect
course, and
on
I,
that, eh? Yeah.
And like I sort of look at it also like I'm doing, some postgraduate studies at the moment, and
Mhm.
in my postgraduate studies, uh, you go through, and I'm not trying to like my head might not fit in the screen anymore, but you just like now if I don't get a HD, it feels like oh, okay, like and it's one of those things that you learn with maturity. So I
Yeah.
understand there is worth attached to marks, but the mark doesn't define you as a human being, and I think we need to continue to tell our students, you are far greater than what the mark is on the page. It's not a definition of you as a human being because
Mhm.
you are you are far more capable than you even realize. It's just about how do we how do we actually get our students to understand that? And then this is where we as a teacher play a very, very instrumental role in these formation stages
So
of the
true.
students' lives. So yeah, like this is one thing that I'm really passionate about. You really do need to challenge that narrative as the mark defining your worth as a human being, because it's not.
Mhm.
Um, and your sense of worth is like, well, what are you going to be as a holistic human being later on down the track?
Yes.
How are you going to contribute to
Yes.
society? How are you going
Yeah.
to, achieve the things later on when things aren't going your way? Um, as an ATAR might not go your way, but I've known so many more successful students, over years that probably haven't even sat the ATAR yet have gone out and purchased properties before students that are still in university at the moment. Now, am I saying you shouldn't sit the ATAR? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying these are the choices that people will make. And does that mean that
Yeah.
people have had to make sacrifices after school in terms of things like less social life or, yeah, like these are the things that we realize as we mature. So again, if we tie our sense of self to the ATAR, you're limiting your potential for the future. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that we really want to challenge
Yeah,
as teachers. And students, you
definitely.
should be challenging that as well. If you're listening,
Mm.
your ATAR isn't a definition of who you are. You are far beyond that. You're created to be far greater in the world of opportunities that you have available to you, and the abundant opportunities we have available to us in Australia. It's
Mhm.
just about
Yeah, definitely.
stepping out and taking a hold of those opportunities.
Mm. I think I think acknowledgement and praise of when they do something wonderful
Mm,
that's not tied to their academic worth, when they show great kindness, when they
yeah,
show great respect, when they show great critical thinking. Like I think there are so many ways that many of us
yeah,
praise the students in the classroom that's not about their exam result or about
yeah,
what they wrote. And I think those moments are so powerful because it does remind the student I'm a holistic being,
yeah.
and as much as we like uplift and we praise and we celebrate with the victories, a lot of us teachers also have experience commiserating with students
Mm,
when things don't go well. And I think how we treat them when things don't go well is
yeah,
going to, yeah, feed into that narrative that they may be telling themselves. So yeah, I noticed that, like, once I had kind of done my first group of, that first two groups you do of your HSC are really hard because you're trying to learn so
yeah,
many things. And then I realized, like, okay, I can't just be all the time this mark, this grade, this band. Like, it's not healthy. And I needed to uplift in other ways. And you're really great at this, making your classroom a really warm environment, a really
mm,
safe environment for sharing, for emotion, for
yeah,
exploring. I think all those holistic things really help shift that narrative.
mm,
So
mm.
lots of great points you made there, Adriel.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, I want to ask you another question then. So, what practical strategies can senior English teachers use to support their students' well-being when they're doing their
Yeah,
HSC, during that year?
mm,
And like what strategies might be
yeah,
supportive without compromising the academic rigor that everybody's trying to establish in their
yeah,
classroom?
yeah. I think this is a very important question to address. So I know it sounds like, I'm not putting any value probably with some of the discourse that we're having on the mark, but I think academics is very, very important. And it's
Yes.
essential for our students. This is why they sit the 11 and 12 course. It's for
Yes.
academic achievement. So there is value attached to that. But I think it's like, what are the things that we are putting in place for our students in the day to day that will allow them to build towards that end goal? So I'll often say this to my students. I'll ask them, well, do you have like a HSE study plan? Have you planned out your weeks or your terms in advance? Have you noted when your assessments are due on some sort of whiteboard? A lot of them will say, I'm a visual learner, sir. Okay, get all of your things out so you can see it. You know when your dates are coming. And these are practical tips for later on in life as well when you've got bills due and whatnot. I know yesterday I was scramming last minute to pay one of my bills that I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot to pay. It's due today. Like it's just like
Yeah.
these are things that the practical things that will actually benefit our students beyond English and in all sort of subjects we can take this across KLAs. but just being organized, having
Yeah.
that plan there, I think it's so significant, and having visual cues and reminders. But beyond that, I'll also say this. I know you and I have come across one of the students that we both um, have 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 seen recently is they are fixated on just study, 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 or what all of a certain high class school might be doing, and all these
Mhm.
plans and this and that and whatever. But they spend 7 hours researching all of these plans without actually putting any of those plans into practice. So
Yeah.
it's like,
Yes.
um, where are we prioritizing our time so we can sit with our students and we can say, okay, like give them concrete ways. By the end of this, you want to achieve X, Y, and Z, and this is it. Like, we need to be practical as students.
Yes.
I have been
Yeah.
guilty of this in previous years of teaching, where I'm a bit wishy-washy. It's like, then what is expected? But some students, and I'm finding this more and more as I develop my teaching pedagogy, the generation that's coming requires concrete, actionable learning
Yeah.
objectives or goals. I mean, in order to achieve things. So I think it's very important for us to understand, that the dynamic or the way in which students are learning is changing. So making sure they have those actionable goals clear, ready for them to sort of see. And then the big one also is taking care of health. Eating well, sleeping well,
Yeah.
making sure you're exercising. I don't know how many times I emphasize this, and then, we know this. I know in my first year of teaching, because it was stressful, I neglected my health and it put on a lot of extra unwanted calories and kilos, I would say, which affected me negatively in terms of my well-being and my mental space. So I think, having a walk in an afternoon, going out
Yes.
in the garden, or taking a puppy dog for a walk, because a lot of students probably do have pets or whatnot. Going to the gym, lifting some weights. Boys and girls. I think it's very, very important, significant, because that is holistic. It will mean that your mind is clear, which means when you do
Mhm.
sit down to do your academic sort of study as part of your routine, then it's actually all sinking in. Whereas if you're just thinking about or stressing about work all the time, nothing sinks in. Students will be like, "Sir, I tried to study and it goes in one ear and out the other." And it's like, well, what are the practical things you're doing to look after your health
Mm.
holistically? And I think it's important for teachers to understand this as well. The HSC year is very, very stressful. We're guilty of this, the two of us, and sometimes spending late nights looking at drafts, um, looking at readings and whatnot, because we want the best for our students, but we do that at the neglect of our family life, our personal life,
Mm.
and over the last few years also, we're making sure that that work life balance is adhered to as well. So I think that's important to consider as well. But if you look after your health and if you look after those key pillars, you are not compromising your academic rigor at all, or vigor at all, because you are actually probably enhancing that, because your mental clarity is going to be far greater when it comes down to study. So yeah, those are a few sort of practical strategies that I would
Yeah.
suggest for our teachers there. Yeah.
I think you've given lots of good ones there. As teachers, we wear many, many hats,
Mm,
and kind of being a bit of a psychologist is one of
yeah.
them. And as you said, sometimes you have students that you have to lift up, and build them up,
Yeah.
and sometimes you will have students that you need to bring kind of back to reality, not in a rude way, just in a you need to give them those more actionable goals. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of why teaching HSC is so tiring, because it's like you said, it's not just the hours that you're spending on drafting, on preparing, on working closely with them, but you are really trying to foster their well-being as much as you can
Yeah.
as their classroom teacher. So
Yeah.
I know that as well. One quick thing, like since becoming a mum, every time I have like students doing their HSC, I'm like, now make sure you're eating lots of protein, lots
Yeah.
of healthy fat, this many hours of sleep, this much
Yeah.
water. And they're like, yeah, yeah. But it's so true, like you said, Adriel, because
Yeah.
if you're not well physically,
Yeah.
mentally, you're not going to perform academically. It's about how your whole
100%.
body is engaging. Yes, I think that's really awesome that you pointed that out. All right. Well, I think maybe last question. and then we'll do some final thoughts. So
Yeah.
looking beyond, when the ATARs are released and the final result comes in, how can we help students, and maybe even ourselves as teachers, maintain this good perspective and sort of build resilience for whatever comes, whatever the result may be, and
Mm,
whatever comes forward in the future?
yeah. I think a key piece of information here is this is not the end, it's just the beginning, It sounds very cliched, and I actually hate that I've said that out loud, but, like, it's a
It's
new
true
journey,
though.
it's a new
Mhm.
yeah, that's right. It's a new chapter in your life, and you can sit there and mope if, things don't go your way or are not what you expected, but the person that will be successful later on is always looking at ways to dig themselves out of, or not, I shouldn't say dig themselves out of, but what's next? Look to what's
Mm.
next, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that's a nice way of looking beyond these ATAR releases. Even if you got a great ATAR, well, what's next? Well, now you've got to actually sign up to uni. Now you've got to do well in uni. Like, I
Yeah.
think this is that perspective. It's like there's not a sense of finality. It's just the closing of one door and moving into that next chapter of your novel. Your narrative that
Mhm.
we sort of look at. And if you've got that great perspective there, you're going to be resilient no matter what challenges come your way, um, in life, in your vocation, in your further studies, in family life, like just everywhere. Really, it's all about building that resilience. Because let's be honest, sometimes life is sucky. Like it sucks,
Yeah.
but you can sit in that suckiness for a month and not feel great for a whole month, or you can be like, all right, it does suck, but what can I go to next?
Yeah.
What's the next goal? What am I going to move to next? And that's a perspective that I've realized recently as well. In teaching, sometimes it's just like, what's next? What's next?
Mhm.
What's next? Now, for some people, it might be climbing the ladder in terms of um, the scale in school hierarchies. For me,
Mhm.
what's next is, well, how am I going to influence and better shape this next generation? Because I find like one of the things that annoys us as teachers will be the lack of engagement and interest that students show these
Yeah.
days. And it's like, what's next? How can
Mm.
you best foster environments for students to appreciate learning? And I think that it's challenging. Don't get me wrong. That's it's going to be a very challenging thing, but it's like something that we look forward to. It's something that we like to solve. It's something that we are created to sort of do is be imaginative, be creative in the ways in which we approach things. So I think beyond the ATAR release, life is just beginning. So
Yeah.
look to what's next.
That's great.
What are you going to do in life? Because curveballs are thrown. You and I both have had personal things in our own lives that 5, 10 years prior we would have been like, as if this is going to happen to me.
Yeah.
And you you go through those moments in life, and then you step out the other way and you think, you know what, I'm glad that that challenge was there, I'm glad that I'm out of that challenge. But also, if I continue to reflect on the the disappointments of my past, you're not going to move forward into the positive future that awaits you. So I think it's very, very significant for all teachers to be living this, but also, reminding our students that the ATAR is not the be all and end all either. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. I love that point. And just to continue with what you were saying, I bumped into some ex-students of mine the other night when I was at dinner, and they were telling me about all the travels they've done and
Mm,
what
mm,
they've been learning and new people they've met, and very rarely do they actually talk about, and I'm studying this and I'm doing that. I mean, sometimes that comes up, but I have to say, for the most part, when we have a chat with students who've seen, it's about how their life is shaping up holistically. Are they happy? Are they making their own safe and good
yeah,
decisions moving forward? Beginning their lives as young adults. And I think that's something, when you talk to your students,
yeah,
exactly like you said, it's one chapter closes, the next one begins. But the way
yeah,
that you ended, that year, and the way that you ended schooling, it doesn't have to determine
Yeah.
negatively the rest of your life if it didn't go to plan. If it went to plan, great. And sometimes our best laid plans don't turn out how we think
Yeah.
they're going to. And I know I've had a lot of students who, have gone, I'm dead on going to do this, and I got the ATAR for that, and then they go, you know what, I changed, it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And good on them, because it is hard to pivot when you've been following
Yeah.
a thing. But I think at the end of the day, like that great point that you made, is it's just the start of your life,
Yeah.
and that autonomy that you have and that youth that you
Mm.
have. And it's a really, I try and just remind them it's going to be a really exciting time, no matter
Yeah.
how that result sways, because you're going to be living your life as an adult moving forward. And I always love that the conversation I have with ex students is more about holistically how they're doing in life, not so much just the academic aspects. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
100%. 100%.
Do you have any like final kind of takeaways or any final
Yeah.
points you want to make, Adriel, before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah. Look, again, once again, really pay attention to not allowing students to define themselves with the mark or the ATAR. And even yourself as a teacher, students will come and go. You're going to get good cohorts and, sorry, not good cohorts, but strong cohorts, and maybe not so strong cohorts, but they might be some of the most rewarding students. And again, you're building young lives. And I think those are the things that we shouldn't look beyond. We're instrumental as teachers. You are a great teacher no matter what KLA you're in, of senior kids, because they are young adults. They're stepping into their adult life, and we play a very significant role in shaping that. So yeah, that's probably the final thoughts there in relation to um, this episode. Hopefully, like there's so much more to talk about, but hopefully we've just got the discussion going. And if you're a student again listening to this, work hard, work hard,
Yeah.
and you'll receive the
Try your
fruits of your
best.
hard work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because you will feel good knowing. I don't know any students who, don't feel good knowing they tried their very best no matter what the result is. I know plenty of
That's right.
students who feel really bad when they're like, "Oh, I could have done better." But yeah,
Yeah,
students who just give it their all and just try their best and can say, "I'm happy with that effort I put in," and that's a huge
yeah,
learning curve and maturity too.
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
100%.
on that note, then, Adriel, we might wrap up this episode and say thank you so much to our listeners. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can see all our socials and all our links are up there. Please give us a like, share, or subscribe, and follow along with us. Interact with us. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can comment on any of our posts, email us. We'd love to hear from you guys.